My name was Amir. I was a faithful student of the Quran, a voice of authority in my community, a son of an Imam and a guardian of tradition. At 32, I had dedicated my life to the echo of prayers and sermons, finding solace in reciting the words of my faith amidst the sacred atmosphere of Mecca during the holy month of Ramadan. But within the reverence, a tempest brewed. A silent void clawed at my spirit, an insatiable thirst for truth that the world around me seemed so eager to suppress. Every prayer became a wrestling match with uncertainty, where faith and doubt danced an agonizing tango in the shadows of my heart. As pilgrims surrounded me in devotion, I felt a dissonance that whispered deep within my soul. Who was I truly praying to? Was there more to the divine than the rigid doctrines I had been taught to uphold? That question hung heavily as I recited, a silent storm threatening to uproot everything I believed. But then, on an evening like any other in the Masjid al-Haram, everything changed. Heat overwhelmed me, and in an instant I was cast into a desolate expanse, far removed from the prayers and the chants. There, in the suffocating emptiness, a radiant figure appeared. Jesus. His brilliance shattered the night. He called my name with a love that pierced the very core of my being, transcending the confines of any religion I had known. In that moment, the constructs I had served fell away. A revelation unfolded, exposing how I had been ensnared by fear, tradition, and the unseen chains of a system designed to distract the soul from its true essence. Back in the world, I awoke not to joy, but to turmoil. I became a pariah in my own home, a heretic branded for daring to embrace a truth that threatened to fracture the fabric of my existence. I found myself wandering in a maze of despair, yet also driven by a fierce light. My new mission began to take shape. I was called to unveil the reality I had witnessed, to awaken others trapped in the shadows of ignorance. I started to seek, to interrogate, to learn under the cloak of night. And while thrills of peace occasionally brushed against my spirit, a haunting fear loomed, the potential to lose everything, my family, my culture, my belonging. So as I recount my journey, know this: each revelation was a step further into a profound purpose, a break from the cycles of fear and repression. There is power in the truth, and in that power lies freedom. Before we delve deeper, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Your connection matters. And if you too feel the pull of a higher truth, subscribe to Truth from Beyond. Let's walk this path of revelation together, because what I'm about to share could change everything. In the sacred city of Mecca, the air was thick with devotion and reverence as we gathered during Ramadan. Pilgrims filled the streets, their souls on fire with the commitment to prayer and obedience. I stood among them, a Quran teacher, deeply respected for my knowledge and adherence to the faith. Yet, beneath the surface of this vibrant devotion, I often sensed an undercurrent of suppressed questions and a palpable fear of social rejection if anyone dared to challenge our traditions. Each recitation felt like both a celebration and a weight, binding me further to the expectations that shaped my existence in this revered place. That tension became unbearable one afternoon, when I found myself drawn to a secluded corner of the Grand Mosque. As I began to recite verses from the Quran, a deep wave of emptiness washed over me. I could hear the murmurs of devotion around me, yet I felt profoundly alone, grappling with doubts that I had buried for far too long. In that moment, I questioned everything: my role as a teacher, my faith, and the very foundations upon which my life stood. The weight of my doubts began to transform into an urgent need for clarity. a hunger for truth that echoed through my spirit, demanding to be expressed. Just then, an unexpected event sent my world spiraling. As I closed my eyes, immersed in recitation, I experienced a blackout, a sudden and all-consuming darkness. In that unending void, I was met with a presence that filled the space with light and warmth. Jesus. His figure was mesmerizing, glowing with a compassion that pierced the heart of my confusion. "Omar," he said, and his voice resonated through the depths of my being, pulling me closer to him. For the first time, I felt safe enough to confront the shadows of doubt that had haunted me for years. In that sacred encounter, I received revelations that reshaped my understanding of faith and the world around me. Jesus illuminated the hidden agendas of the elite, revealing how fear and manipulation twisted our belief systems to propagate deception. I saw the patterns of division, how our cultures, wrapped in pride and tradition, had driven a wedge between humanity and the love that should unite us. Each revelation dismantled the chains that had bound my spirit, exposing the spiritual war that raged not only within me but across the globe. The realization that so many lived their lives entrapped by lies and misconceptions surged through me like a fire igniting my purpose. When I awoke from that experience, I was forever changed. The vibrant colors of Mecca had lost their luster. All that remained was the stark reality of my situation. I felt a fierce and urgent calling to share the truth I had discovered. No longer could I simply recite verses and uphold traditions without understanding their implications. I felt the weight of responsibility on my shoulders, compelled to help others awaken to their truth, to guide them beyond the manipulation that entrapped us all. I knew the journey ahead would be fraught with danger. Abandoning my roots could lead to losing everything I ever loved. Yet the thought of remaining silent, of disregarding the revelations that had transformed me, was a far worse fate. The moment had arrived for me to step boldly into a new identity and lead others into the light of awakening. I'm Amir, a 32-year-old man raised as the son of an Imam in the heart of Mecca. My life has been woven into the rich tapestry of Islamic tradition, grounded in the study of the Quran and a fervent dedication to spreading our faith. I've earned respect within my community, yet beneath the surface lies a profound emptiness, an unsettling discontent that gnaws at my spirit. Day after day, I recite verses I've memorized, but with each prayer I find myself grappling with nameless doubts that linger like shadows in the back of my mind. Despite the admiration I receive, there's an internal struggle playing out. A spiritual war where my devotion feels increasingly at odds with my growing unease. I've watched as my peers cling tightly to traditional beliefs, and while they seem secure in their faith, I feel a pressing need to seek deeper truths. It's as if my understanding of God is trapped in a structure that limits my experience. I begin to wonder if there's more to life than the rituals that once brought me peace. The questions swirl in my mind, exhausting yet invigorating, urging me to explore the depths of my spirituality. One fateful day, my routine life was interrupted by a moment that would alter my path forever. As I was driving home after a long day of teaching, I lost control of my car. In an instant, everything went dark. That moment of chaos transformed into an out-of-body experience, where I felt suspended between life and the unknown. As the world faded, I found myself enveloped in a light that felt like home, a warmth that drew me closer, defying my fears and doubts. And then, as if the universe bent to my presence, Jesus appeared before me, radiant and inviting. "Amir," he said, and I felt his words echo through the fabric of my being. In that moment, layers of fear and uncertainty peeled away. Jesus began to share truths that shattered my understanding of faith. He revealed the hidden agenda wielded by the elite, how they distorted religion to foster division and perpetuate deception. I witnessed how the spiritual war is not solely fought within our hearts, but is a global battle for the souls of humanity, a battle rooted in manipulation and power. Each revelation left me astonished and yearning for understanding, igniting a fire within me that demanded to be expressed. As I returned to consciousness, I was not the same man who had experienced that accident. The revelations I received now filled my heart with purpose, yet I also felt an overwhelming weight of responsibility. I understood that staying silent about what I had learned would be a betrayal to the very truths that had set me free. The truth about Jesus and the awakening I had experienced wasn't just for me. It was meant to illuminate the paths of others who felt entrapped by the same lies. While fear of backlash from my family and community loomed large, the urgency to rise and share this truth became my guiding light. The journey ahead promised to be fraught with challenges, but I was determined to be a voice of hope in a world steeped in darkness, ready to confront the shadows that sought to consume us all. During prayers, I often found myself engulfed in a profound sense of spiritual unrest. As Amir, a Quran teacher in the heart of Mecca, I was revered for my dedication to faith, yet, beneath that surface of respect, lay an inexplicable disconnect. I would stand among my students, reciting verses meant to uplift and inspire, but as I spoke those words, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I was wrestling with questions that felt far too dangerous to voice. Doubts about the coherence of my faith and the traditions I had always followed without question. The pressure to conform weighed heavily on me, drowning out the flickers of curiosity and longing that stirred deep within. In the quiet hours of night, vivid dreams began to intrude upon my otherwise routine existence. Each time I closed my eyes, I was transported to a place filled with a resplendent light that felt both familiar and foreign. It was as if I were being called to something greater, an awakening that constantly danced just out of reach. These dreams were not mere fantasies. They were laden with significance, and though I couldn't fully grasp their meaning, I sensed they were woven with divine purpose. Yet, in the waking world, I felt utterly isolated, unable to share these experiences with anyone for fear of being dismissed or labeled a heretic. As the weight of my internal struggles intensified, I became more acutely aware of the spiritual war one was engaged in. This war wasn't only a personal battle against my doubts. It was a wider conflict against the hidden agenda of the elite, forces that manipulated our beliefs to maintain power and sow division among our communities. I began to perceive how the teachings we accepted so blindly had often been twisted, concealing the profound truth of love, unity, and understanding. The realization was jarring, but liberating, igniting a flicker of hope deep within me, a hope that perhaps I could embrace a fuller understanding of spirituality. One fateful evening, my sense of unease culminated in a moment that would alter the course of my life. As I sat in deep contemplation of my faith, a sudden vision engulfed me. I stepped into that luminous light once again, and there stood Jesus, looking directly at me with eyes brimming with compassion. His presence filled me with peace I had never known, and as he spoke my name, I felt all my fears melt away. In that sacred moment, Jesus began to unveil the deeper realities of life and spirituality, truths that illuminated the dark corners of my understanding and ushered me into a place of profound awakening. He revealed the interconnected nature of our struggles, the conflicts waged not only in our hearts but across the globe, fueled by the deceptions that kept communities divided and fear-driven. I witnessed how the spiritual war could only be won through love and truth, and that these elements were at the very core of transformation. Each revelation was a gift, yet carried the weight of responsibility. I now understood that staying silent in the face of such truths would only perpetuate the very deception I sought to escape. The visions I had experienced were not just for my own benefit. They were meant to be shared, to inspire others to awaken from the slumber of complacency. And with this newfound clarity, I felt an urgency to act, an urgency to confront the darkness with a message of hope and transformation. One night, while reciting the Quran at Masjid al-Haram, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, intensifying as the heat enveloped my being. I had always cherished these moments of devotion, but on this night, the familiar sense of connection gave way to disorientation. As I continued my prayers, I could feel the ground slipping beneath me, and within moments, I fainted. The world around me blurred into a cacophony of sound and sensation, before plunging me into an oppressive darkness that felt both disconcerting and liberating. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in an arid desert, stretching endlessly before me. The air was thick and heavy, an oppressive silence enveloping me, broken only by the sound of my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. Confusion gripped me as I tried to make sense of my surroundings. It was then, emerging from the haze, that I saw a figure radiant with light. Jesus. His presence radiated a warmth that cut through the desert's chill. Amir. He called, and I realized that this was not just a casual encounter. It was a summons, a beckoning to deeper truths and revelations. In that moment, a profound clarity washed over me. Jesus began to unveil the hidden truths surrounding my existence, revealing the deception that had bound my spirit for so long. He illuminated my understanding of the spiritual war, waging not only within myself but across the world. I saw how the elite had woven a narrative that kept us shackled to outdated beliefs, manipulating fear to divert our attention from the essence of genuine spirituality. The stark reality of how structured religions often served as distractions instead of pathways to true connection became painfully clear. Every revelation pierced through the layers of my doubts, showing me not just the conflict of my own faith, but the larger societal implications at play. I recognized the struggles we faced, wars fueled by distorted truths, divisions perpetuated by fear, and the technological manipulation employed to maintain a status quo. This was not merely a personal awakening. It was an invitation for a collective awakening, a call to action against the forces that sought to keep humanity divided and in chains. When I finally returned to consciousness, the warmth of that encounter lingered, but I knew my journey was just beginning. The weight of the truth rested on my shoulders, and for the first time I felt a fierce urgency to share what I had learned. How could I remain silent when so many were still lost? The fear of backlash and rejection from my community loomed large, but the knowledge that I had been called to fight against deception sparked a fire within me. I understood that the path ahead would not be easy, but every step taken towards spreading this truth brought me closer to my newfound calling. I was ready to confront not only my past but also the spiritual war awaiting all those who sought the light of awakening. Upon regaining consciousness, I was thrust back into a tormenting reality that felt heavier than any burden I had ever carried. The memories of my encounter with Jesus lingered like a vivid dream, both nourishing and disorienting. I opened my eyes to the world around me, one that now felt foreign. I was branded a heretic by my family and community, and the weight of that label pressed down on my shoulders like an anchor. The tension was palpable. The weight of their disapproval was echoing in the silence that surrounded me. I had known love and respect before, but now I faced aggression and social exclusion. I wandered through the streets of Medina, once filled with familiarity, now steeped in hostility. Their stares pierced through me, heavy with judgment, and I felt exposed, like a raw nerve in a harsh world. The fear of losing everyone I loved was compounded by the guilt that gnawed at my conscience. Had I really turned my back on them, on the faith that had shaped my life? I was trapped in the dichotomy of truth and tradition, one that pulled me apart at the seams. The spiritual war, one now understood, was not only external but raging violently within me, a battle for my very soul and beliefs. What I had gained from my near-death experience was a profound awakening to the deception that had kept me shackled for so long, yet at this moment I felt paralyzed. My newfound truth clashed violently with the identity I had cultivated all my life. I remembered Jesus' words, the revelations about the hidden agenda of the elite, the ways they manipulated faith to sow discord among people. The realization that I had spent years perpetuating these falsehoods weaving through my mind felt like an unrelenting storm, creating waves of disorientation and fear. In quiet moments, the flashes of my awakening would crash against the memories of my loved ones. I longed to share the truth I had discovered, yet the fear of being met with hostility loomed large. My heart ached to reach out, to explain how my faith had evolved into something deeper and more profound. But the environment was thick with tradition and guarded by the chains of obedience. I grappled with loneliness, yearning for connection, while simultaneously feeling the need to isolate myself from the very people I once sought to inspire. Every revelation I had received urged me to stand against the turbulence of deception, but instead, I felt adrift in solitude. Nights became an endless cycle of wrestling with my thoughts and fears. How could I reconcile the love I had for my family with this path that seemed to set me apart? I began to seek refuge in the teachings of Jesus, clinging to the hope that my spiritual war would ultimately lead to a victory not just for myself, but for others ensnared in the same struggle. The journey of awakening began to call me to rise, to transform my experience into a beacon of hope and truth, even as I continued to navigate the tumultuous waters of my new reality. In my quest for truth, I found myself trapped between the rigid confines of my upbringing and an insatiable longing for something deeper. I am Ahmed, and for years I devoted my life to the teachings of Islam, leading prayers and guiding my students through the Quran. Yet, the more I delved into my faith, the more I felt an unsettling disconnect within my spirit. The warmth of devotion gave way to questions that echoed in the silence of my heart. In my mind, I knew there was more to spirituality, more to God than the doctrines I was taught to accept without question. Driven by that desire, I began exploring the Bible in secret. The experience was both thrilling and terrifying. I would spend countless hours late at night, reading verses that challenged everything I believed. It felt as if I was discovering a hidden world, a revelation waiting to unfold. I watched videos of others who had undergone similar transformations. People who once walked the familiar paths of Islam but found their truth in Jesus. Their stories resonated with me, reflecting the turmoil I felt inside. Each testimony was like a puzzle piece that helped form a picture of the awakening I yearned for. As I connected with a clandestine group of ex-Muslims who had transitioned to Christianity, I felt a sense of camaraderie and understanding that had been absent in my life. These individuals shared not only their stories, but also their struggles with identity, culture, and faith. I found solace in their acceptance and support, a refuge from the judgment I feared from the outside world. But amidst this newfound peace, a gnawing fear began to fester within me, the fear of losing my family and all that I held dear. My culture, the very fabric of my identity built upon traditions and shared faith, felt like it was slipping through my fingers. The reality of my choices became a source of constant tension. I grappled with guilt for even considering a path that diverged from my family's expectations. The spiritual war one felt within intensified as I weighed the consequences of my actions against the truths I was discovering. I constantly reminded myself of the manipulation by the elite, how they twisted beliefs and created division under a hidden agenda. The deception that had reigned for so long was now crystal clear, and I couldn't ignore the urgency to speak out, to share what I had learned. Yet the personal costs weighed heavily on my heart, and the fear of severing ties with those I loved made every step forward feel precarious. In the quiet of my thoughts, I began to embrace the fact that my awakening was not just for my benefit. It was a calling to help others see beyond the layers of deception that bound them, just as I had once been bound. I resolved to stand firm in my truth, even if it meant creating distance from the life I had always known. I drew strength from the connections I had forged with my new community, recognizing that they too were in a perpetual fight against conformity. Together, we welcomed each other into a world filled with love, authenticity, and the potential for spiritual renewal. As I prepared to embrace my new identity, I couldn't ignore the path ahead, filled with uncertainty, but also the promise of hope, healing, and transformation. Recognizing my experience as a divine calling, I felt an overwhelming conviction building within me. The moments I spent in the presence of Jesus during my near-death experience had revealed profound truths I could no longer ignore. The revelations about the hidden agenda of the elite, their manipulation of faith, and the societal structures that perpetuated deception compelled me to act. I realized my awakening wasn't just for my own liberation. It was a clarion call to warn others, to share the truths that could help them break free from their spiritual chains. Days turned into weeks as I wrestled with the intense desire to speak out. Each morning as I recited my prayers, I felt the urgency growing within me, echoing in the sacred spaces of my heart. The more I learned about the spiritual war being waged, the more determined I became to share my journey with those who needed to hear it. I envisioned speaking to my former students, to my community, anyone who might benefit from understanding the deeper implications of their beliefs. The thought of awakening others stirred a sense of purpose that lit a fire in my soul. Yet the fear of retaliation loomed over me like an ominous shadow. The very people I sought to help could just as easily turn against me. The risk of rejection from my family and community frightened me. I remembered the faces of my friends and the joy we had shared in faith, and the thought of being cast out felt almost unbearable. How could I confront the deception that had kept us shackled without losing the very people I loved? Each moment I hesitated weighed heavily on my conscience. I thought of the risks involved, the potential loss of safety, and the isolation I might face in this quest for truth. In those quiet moments of reflection, I also experienced an awakening of courage. I knew that to stay silent would be to abandon the mission I felt divinely entrusted with. Jesus had shown me the realities of manipulation, of how deeply intertwined our spirituality is with the struggles of society. I recognized that the spiritual awakening I had encountered must be shared, and that meant taking a leap of faith into the unknown. Each prayer became a declaration, an affirmation of my intent to embrace this calling despite the potential cost to my life. This journey toward awakening was no longer just about me. It was about all those still trapped in fear and confusion. I could feel the walls of tradition closing in on those around me, and I had a choice: to help dismantle those walls or remain complicit in upholding them. I envisioned gatherings, discussions filled with exploration and light, where we could challenge the hidden agendas of those who sought to control our thoughts and beliefs. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with difficulties and resistance, but the light of truth within me burned brighter now. It was time to embrace my role, to be a voice of hope and transformation, and to walk this spiritual war not just for myself but for all who longed for liberation. I made the courageous decision to leave behind everything I had ever known, casting off my old life for a chance at true freedom. My heart raced as I realized what that meant: changing my name, leaving my home in Medina, and traversing the unforgiving desert. The choice wasn't light. It carried the weight of abandonment. I knew that in making this move, I would be severing ties with family and friends who might never understand my path. But the spiritual war within me demanded liberation, and the vision Jesus had shown me during my near-death experience echoed in my mind. I could no longer ignore the truth that had unfolded before me. The hidden agenda of the elite controlling our beliefs must be exposed. As I journeyed through the arid landscape, the starkness of my surroundings mirrored the inner turmoil I felt. Each step taken was a step away from the comfort of routine, a routine built on traditions that had begun to feel more like constraints than guidance. I'd grown up believing that my purpose was defined by strict adherence to the teachings of Islam. Now, faced with the harsh reality of the desert, I felt stripped of my former identity. The heat bore down on me, rendering me vulnerable, yet I pressed on, holding fast to the revelation that had ignited my spirit. This mission was not just about my awakening. It was about gathering with others who sought the same truth. Through the haze of uncertainty, I began to seek out like-minded individuals. I longed for companionship, to share the burden of this awakening, and spread the gospel I felt compelled to share. In clandestine gatherings, I met fellow travelers who had also left their pasts behind, each of them carrying stories of revelation and transformation. We sat around campfires, whispered of our journeys, and the solidarity we found in our shared experiences became a balm for our wounds. We spoke of the spiritual war that extended beyond our individual battles, exposing the collective manipulation we had endured by the very systems that were supposed to protect us. Yet, with this new sense of community, the haunting fear of rejection from my family lingered in the back of my mind. I often thought of my parents, of their expectations, and how my departure would shatter the dreams they had for my life. It was a powerful reminder of the life I had left behind. The guilt of abandoning them battled with the invigorating sense of purpose I felt in aligning with the truth. Every time I shared my story, I was met with understanding and love from those around me. But the thought of disapproval from those I cherished deeply cast a shadow over my heart. Despite the turmoil, I realized that my mission to enlighten others was more significant than my personal fears. Each day became a call to action, an opportunity to plant seeds of hope for those still entrapped by the deception they had accepted. I encouraged my fellow seekers to rise up against the forces that sought to divide us and manipulate our understanding of faith. Yet, as I prepared to embrace the mantle of a new identity, I felt the tension of the path ahead. The journey was just beginning, and I was determined to face whatever challenges would come my way, armed with the truth that had changed my life and could change the lives of many more. Years later, I found myself in a new community in a different city, a place where I could finally be open about my journey and share my testimony without fear of ridicule or rejection. I had turned my back on the life I once knew in Medina, leaving behind the rigid structure of tradition that had suffocated my spirit for so long. My conversion to Christianity had brought me immense freedom, yet it also left me with a heavy heart as I thought of my family, the faces I missed dearly, and the chasm that now separated us. The hope for reconciliation ran deep within me, even as I dedicated my life to assisting others in their search for spiritual liberation. In this new chapter, I embraced the mission to help others awaken to their own truths. I found joy in sharing stories of revelation, speaking of how my encounter with Jesus had transformed my understanding of faith. I recounted those critical moments when he illuminated the hidden agendas that kept so many trapped in deception, the manipulation orchestrated by the elite, designed to maintain control over our beliefs and fuel division among us. Each time I spoke, I felt a surge of purpose wash over me, knowing that my experience could inspire others to question the narratives that imprisoned them. As I engaged with my community, I noticed many who shared similar pains and struggles, individuals yearning for the truth buried under layers of fear and confusion. We gathered in small groups, discussing our journeys and fostering a sense of belonging that had been absent from my life for so long. In those spaces, people began to unlock their potential to think critically, confronting the societal structures that deceived them. The spiritual awakening in this group felt palpable, and I could sense a growing energy, as if we were tapping into something far greater than ourselves. However, the shadow of doubt occasionally cast a pall over my heart. Every moment of joy was tinged with the fear of losing connection with my past. I still loved my family, and the thought of being branded a traitor weighed heavily on my conscience. I worried about how they would perceive my new beliefs. Could they ever understand the truth I had found? While sharing the joy of my journey with others, I found myself wrestling internally with the pain of separation from my roots. Despite the emotional turmoil, I felt a relentless urge to break my silence. Too many were suffering in silence, and I couldn't allow fear to keep me from being a beacon of truth. As I continued to engage with this growing community, I embraced my role with urgency. With each testimony shared, I witnessed hearts beginning to change, eyes opening to the light of Jesus, and lives being transformed. I felt as if a divine plan was unfolding before me, forging connections that transcended cultural boundaries and uniting us in our quest for spiritual freedom. Alongside my new friends, I sought to challenge the fear and deception that kept us divided, igniting a movement for awakening and empowerment. My journey, once felt solitary, was now shared, a collective spiritual battle against the shadows that sought to overshadow the truth we had claimed. With fresh resolve and a heart full of hope, I knew the mission was only beginning, and I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As I sat in the heart of Mecca, reciting the Quran, a deep sense of unrest grew within me. My name is Amir, and at 32 years old, I had devoted my life to teaching and spreading the Islamic faith, guided by the teachings of my father, an esteemed Imam. Yet, despite the reverence I felt within the walls of the sacred mosque, I couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling of emptiness that lingered beneath the surface of my devotion. The prayers that once filled me with purpose now felt like hollow echoes, a routine that left me spiritually unsatisfied. I was trapped, caught in the conflict between my deep-seated loyalty to my faith and an insatiable hunger for truth. One muggy evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the call to prayer resonated through the streets, I suddenly lost my footing and fainted. The world around me slipped away, and I felt myself descending into a profound darkness. It was in that void that everything changed. I found myself suspended in an ethereal realm where time ceased to exist. Then, amidst that darkness, a brilliant light emerged. Jesus. His radiance enveloped me, and the warmth emanating from his being invited me closer. Amir. He called out, and for the first time I felt seen beyond my obligations and expectations. In that transformative moment, Jesus began revealing the fundamental truths that had been hidden from me. He illuminated the lies woven into the very fabric of society, the hidden agenda of the elite who used religion as a tool for manipulation and control. I saw how these deceptions perpetuated a cycle of fear and division, constructing barriers that kept us estranged from our true spiritual essence. The revelation pierced through my understanding, prompting a profound realization. While religion can imprison, the truth can liberate. I felt an overwhelming sense of urgency, a calling to awaken from the slumber of conformity that had entrapped so many, including myself. As I navigated this revelation, the pain of my situation weighed heavily upon my heart. I was faced with the daunting reality that my new understanding could sever ties with my family and community. The fear of being branded a heretic or an infidel loomed large, and still, the pull to break free intensified. I understood that my journey wasn't solely for my own benefit. It was about bearing witness to the truth, about guiding others toward their own awakening. Every day spent in silence felt like an affront to the revelations I had been gifted. I could no longer stand idly by, watching as others remained shackled by the very doctrines that had once given me comfort. Upon returning to consciousness, the weight of my encounter rushed back, filling me with both purpose and fear. Each day brought new challenges. As I wrestled with my desire to share what I had learned, I began to explore the possibility of reaching out to others who felt an awakening stirring within them, forming connections with like-minded individuals seeking freedom from the constraints of deception. Together, we could challenge the societal narratives that sought to keep us divided, igniting a movement for truth that could resonate far beyond our individual journeys. The urgency was palpable, and as I prepared to step into this mission, I knew the path ahead would be fraught with trials. But the liberation I had experienced urged me to speak, to act, and to embrace the truth with unwavering courage. As I take a moment to reflect on this profound journey, I find myself standing at the precipice of an awakening that transcends the very foundations of who I thought I was. Have you ever experienced a moment that shook the core of your beliefs? A fleeting instant that illuminated the shadows of doubt? Because I have. My encounter with Jesus unveiled a deeper reality, shattering the illusions that had once defined my existence, urging me to embrace a truth that is both liberating and haunting. In that sacred moment within the darkness, I realized that our spiritual journey is intricately woven into the fabric of a greater struggle. We are not just individuals traversing our paths. We are participants in a cosmic battle, a spiritual war against the forces of fear and deception that seek to bind us. The revelations I received were not merely for my eyes alone. They are a call to arms for souls everywhere who feel trapped and long for deeper understanding. Together, we can confront the constructs that manipulate our beliefs, pushing us into the light of liberation. Now I implore you to share your truth with me. Have you ever felt that twinge of doubt in the midst of devotion? a whisper that something greater waits beyond the doctrines we've accepted. Chronicles of personal experiences spark connection. Your voice can inspire others in this collective awakening. Tell me about your journey in the comments below. Let's connect in our quest for truth. If this story resonates with you, don't turn away without subscribing to our channel, Truth from Beyond, and activating the notification bell. Each episode unpacks stories that challenge awareness and inspire growth. And every voice matters in this movement of awakening. By joining our community, you become part of the broader tapestry of souls seeking liberation in the face of darkness. In the next video, I will delve into another extraordinary encounter, one that reveals how the seeds of truth can grow into an unbreakable bond of love and transformation. Thank you for walking this path with me. I'm Amir. Until we meet again, remember, the truth calls to those who are ready to seek it.